Okay, so view, speaker, gallery. Okay, we're good with gallery. Okay, here we go. Well, this is Ed, and I'm in San Diego, and today is April 15, 2025. Stephen Howard, author, leadership championship, is with us. He's in Phoenix today. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Ed. Good to see you and happy tax day.
Yeah, I'll try to be happy. So today is about it was about you, but it's about leadership. And this show is not political, but geopolitics seems to be entering everything. So some things here may discuss some politics, but the idea is that it's not a political show. It's all about business, but leadership styles is what we're talking about, and effectiveness. Stephen Howard has written many books, and he'll get into the number and the why and the how. HUMONY, HUMONY, has really been a smash hit, taking getting a lot of attention across HR and across C-suite because it's so it's humanistic rather than dictatorial, and at the same time smart with a capital S about providing psychological safety. Doesn't matter whether it's remote or on site, hybrid, anywhere. Tell us about your view of this concept called psychological safety with regard to leadership today.
Well, thanks, Ed, and that's a good summation of my thoughts. The psychological safety is just really creating a workplace environment, and so this doesn't have to be done at the C-suite. That can be done by a department head, or it can be done by a manager who only has 12 people reporting to her or him. The psychological safety is an environment where it's okay to speak up. You won't be shot down. You won't be criticized or ridiculed for your thoughts, your opinions. It's an environment where if you make a
Mm.
mistake, you own up to it. And again, you learn from your mistakes. It's not about punishing somebody for a mistake. It's about, finding out what the root cause of the mistake was, how to do it better in the future, and what not only that individual, but the entire team or the entire organization can learn from that mistake. So these are very, very important things in today's world where collaboration is so important for success. Collaboration within the team and collaboration between people in different departments, different silos of the organization.
So, what do you think of authoritarianism? Obviously, this is the exact opposite of what we're talking about, right?
Well, I don't think much about it, definitely. Although let me rephrase that. I mean, authoritarianism as a leadership style is applicable in certain situations, but it's not applicable in the overall general workplace. And those certain situations are, for instance, a trauma surgeon in a hospital. It has to be authoritative. I mean, he or she has to tell the nurses or the support staff or the doctors, you do this, you clamp this artery, you hold this into place, or you administer these drugs. There's no time for debate, there's no time for collaboration, but they do it in a style that's not threatening. And so when we talk about authoritarianism or authoritative type leadership, that threatening aspect comes to it, where it's, do it my way or the highway, or, you're out of here, or, you get abused. That's the kind of leadership that's no longer tolerated in the workplace. And I think coming out of the pandemic, and I know we've been out of the pandemic now for a couple of years, but we're still coming out of it in many ways in our mindsets. The people just decide, I don't need to work for bully boss. I don't need to drive 35, 45, 55 minutes to go spend 8 hours of my life in a toxic environment and then spend 45 minutes, 55 minutes driving home, stewing about that toxic environment, and then taking it out on my family members or friends when I do reach home or, friend's house or whatever. So that authoritarian style it doesn't work, but you know what I'm afraid of, Ed? I'm afraid it's coming back. And the reason I'm afraid that it's coming back to a degree, not necessarily a significant degree, but to a degree is we see the president of the United States, we see the Elon Musk, we see other leaders who are very authoritative in their authoritarianism in their approach, and that's getting all the publicity these days. And I think some people are saying, well, hey, seems to work for them, maybe I'll do it. So I'm a little bit worried about that over the short term.
Yeah, it's scary and disruptive and painful and disconcerting, and it doesn't seem safe.
No, it's not safe. It's not safe at all. But it's interesting. I've coached a significant number of leaders over the years, and I was coaching a gentleman in Houston a few years ago. This is just before the pandemic, and he was very authoritarian, and he was a bit of a bully. He would yell and shout at people. He would throw papers at them. I one time, saw him throw a stapler across the room, not at somebody, but just threw it in anger about what somebody had said. And I was brought in to coach this individual, and he said, "Well, look, that's my style. That's who I am. They have to take it or leave it." Now, I don't want to stereotype it too much, but he was, what we would call a good old boy in Texas. He worked hard in the oil fields. He'd been out in the rigs. He had that roughness to him from a background perspective, and now he was in an office environment, leading people. And I asked him, I said, when you go to your parent teacher conference for your daughter and the teacher says something that upsets you, do you act like that? Do you get angry? Do you slam the desk? No, of course not. No, that would be inappropriate. I said, I know you're a church going person. When you go to church and the pastor says something or one of your fellow worshipers says something that angers you, do you get angry? Do you throw things at them? No, of course not. That'd be inappropriate. So I said, it's not who you are then, is it? It's only who you pretend to be here in the workplace. And boy, did I see the light go on for him. And I give him credit. It took 5 or 6 months. We worked with him. We coached him. He used me as a sounding board, and he changed over those 6 months. And it was good he didn't try and do it overnight because it wouldn't have been successful. But he changed the way he led people, and that opened up my eyes to realize that people can change, even to that extent.
That that's a really nice story. Let me ask you a question about that. Um, did he do mea culpa? Get on the company TV station and or on Zoom, all hands meeting, and say, "I'm being coached. I recognize w- uh, strong behavior that I see now differently." That kind of thing.
He didn't do it at first, and I coached him not to do it immediately because, quite honestly, he had no credibility to do that. He could have said, I'll change my ways, and people would just say, yeah, we'll believe it when we see it. So we worked for a couple months on it, and then in a meeting, something came up, and somebody kind of asked a question of saying, "Boy, I thought you were going to blow your temper again about this." And he goes, "No, and he paused and said, "I am taking some dedicated steps to control my anger. I realize that has been part of my character. I apologize for that if it's offended anybody." And he kind of did a kind of a 4 or 5 minute soliloquy. And I was in the meeting. I was at the back of the room observing him. And he didn't reference me. He didn't reference the coaching. He just said he was taking some proactive steps to change, and he would appreciate any feedback from his team as he continued. And he admitted it was a process. And he said, "Look, I'm like anybody else. I'm human. I'll make a mistake, and if I do, I'm going to apologize now in advance. But I'll also apologize in the future if I do lose my temper or do something." So it was a remarkable turnaround.
So my question uh, about where does it come from? Where does that? He's got it. That guy demonstrated like whoa, 180. or just pulled over, stopped driving down that road. He pulled over in a stop place, resting
Mhm.
place. And so, where does leadership come from? It's all up here, right?
It's a mindset. It's a mindset, and he had a picture of what he thought a manager should be, or what a leader should be. He got, like I said, he was in the field, and yeah, he led some people in the field, but they were like him. They were, the roughnecks, as they're called in the oil industry, the people on the rigs, and they have a certain banter to them and a certain camaraderie between them. And but when he brought that style of leadership into the office environment, and where you had a much more diverse workforce in terms of age, gender, backgrounds, education backgrounds. It didn't work. It was, and he was losing people. He had One of the reasons I was asked to coach him was I was told that he had one of the highest employee turnover rates in the department. Of I don't think there were like 25 or 30 different managers, and he'd been in that role for 12 or 15 months when I was brought in, and he had one of the highest, if not the highest rate of employee turnover. He was turning people out. People were just leaving, either internally or leaving the company. And that wasn't helping the business at all.
It's fascinating. Um, how did you develop insight and the persona, the self persona, to be able to deal with these high-powered people?
Wow, and that's a wonderful question. And I immediately think back to probably one of the smartest things I did in my college education was I took two psychology courses, like Psychology 101 and Psychology 102 or something. Uh, but those courses gave me an insight into people's behavior and humans people's thinking processes, and I applied that to my marketing career. I think that's I've always said that those courses on psychology were the foundation of why I had great success as a marketing person and a branding expert. And particularly when I went to Asia and started applying some of this knowledge across cultures, understanding why a consumer would buy a product, which is psychology basically, made me a better marketing person. Well, when I got into teaching people and training people, I started applying that same process to understanding why are they behaving this way? Why do they have this thinking? And then getting again to those root causes. It's people's mindsets. It's what they think a manager looks like. It's kind of like, as a parent, what do we think a parent should look like? How should a parent behave in public if their child throws a tantrum in a supermarket? And we all have different perspectives of that, and therefore we all behave differently in those situations. The same thing as happens to managers and leaders. So that was the foundation for me, I think. Um,
Hmm, interesting. So Humany is all about that.
Yeah, Humany is about the mindset. That you can change your mindset. Concepts called a growth mindset, understanding that you can learn new behaviors. And look, a mindset is so powerful. And often when I talk to people, I'll say, like, well, what do you do? And you can tell how loyal an employee is to their company. I'll give you an example. I talked to somebody and I said, what do you do? And they said, oh, I'm a software engineer. Oh, who do you work for? Oh, I work for IBM. Okay. They identify first as a software engineer and then secondly as an IBM employee. If I ask somebody else, hey, what do you do? Maybe same function. And they say, oh, I work at IBM. What do you do? Oh, I'm a financial controller. Okay, they identify as an IBM employee first, and then they're functional as second. So just that simple question will give you an insight into people. So it's their mindset. And look, we all have it, and we all have or can have a growth mindset, but we all can have a fixed mindset for years, for years. And look, as you know, I lived in Asia 21 years. I lived in Mexico for 3 years. I've traveled all over Asia. And people always ask me, well, did you learn another language? How many languages do you speak? And I would always say, I only speak English or I only speak American English. And they say, why? I said, I just don't have the capacity to learn another language. That was my mindset. Well, I've changed that mindset. And I've told myself I can learn Spanish, and I am learning Spanish. I'm not proficient in it, but I'm getting better and better at it day by day. And hopefully by the end of this year or early next year, I'll be at least conversational in Spanish. But I had to change my mindset to do that. Otherwise, I kept having this roadblock that says, Stephen, you're incapable of learning a language. Why try?
So the imposter syndrome is what we're talking about.
It's part of that.
A block.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is the opposite. The imposter syndrome is when you know you're not capable, but you're going to pretend to be so and hope you don't get found out. Um, and it's the concept is fake it till you make it, which I thought was a terrible concept. I think it came out in the late, 20 early part of the 2000s or the early part of the 2010s. I don't know what we're calling the teen decade, but the problem with that, quite frankly, Ed, is that people will see through that so quickly. I mean, that's like this gentleman we're talking about from the oil company. If he had gone in the next day after our conversation, next week, and started being friendly, walked in, hi Ed, how you doing? How's your family? How's it? And talked to that, and talked to speak to 8 different people. People look at him like, who is this person? And, oh, he went to a training class. We'll see how long this lasts. They'll see through the bravado and the facade. And that's why I told him, don't just work on it for 2 months before you even say anything publicly about it. Let people see action first, then they'll believe the change that you're making. The same thing is when you're trying to fake it. Um, I tell people don't do that. Go get skilled in it first, and then let people see that you've learned a new skill.
So let's zero in on what you just said, but from a different angle. Um, Communicating, that's a tough situation for you as a person, that you got to deal with these personalities. And how do you prepare yourself to communicate with a bully kind of person?
Oh, I spend time asking a lot of questions. I'm a big believer that, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we learn more when we listen than when we talk. Um, and I observe. I try not to rush to judgment. I think that's the other thing, and that is part of our brain when we rush to judgment and we fix a judgment about someone's character. It's very hard to change that. So I try and go in very open-ended. I don't try and say, "Oh, I know I've seen this situation before. I know how to handle it," because every situation is different and every individual is different. And I want to see what the background is to that. I've had other people who are bullies, and turned out one of them suffered from child abuse, and that was his background. It was his defense mechanism because he had been bullied as a teenager by his father, and as he grew up, that was his defense mechanism. When I learned more about that individual, we broke that down. So I'm not a psychologist, but I understand people's human behavior enough to be able to talk them through things and then ask questions like, is this getting you anywhere? What is this buying you? And and like the other gentleman, what was the benefit of throwing that stapler across the room? And he paused and he thought, well, there was no benefit. So then why do it? I mean, yes, you released your anger, but I can show you other ways to release your anger. And he had a right to be angry in that situation. That was a major screw up by somebody. It was going to be an expensive fix. But we have the right to be angry in the workplace. It's how we express that anger that makes all the difference. I mean, we can be upset with an employee who makes a major mistake. That's our job as leader, not our job, but that's understandable as a leader to be angry and upset. But throwing a stapler across the room is not the way to express that anger. And it's certainly not going to help the employee improve.
So what we're talking about is general, or is there a different way of going about things? Um, Whether you're coaching, whether your client is a female or a male.
Not overly. The root cause, we're all human beings at the core. Well, I do find there are different issues sometimes with women that I coach than with men, and particularly in terms of confidence levels. Um, Women will tend to, and again, this is stereotypical, but women, for instance, I was coaching two women a couple of years ago who were bidding on a project with a major multinational company. They're vendors. And when they read the specs and we were going through it with them, they said, "Oh, we don't do everything there." I think they wanted the vendor to not only organize events, but they also want them to do PR. And they said, "Well, we don't do PR. We don't do public relations." I said, "Well, apply anyway." And they said, "Oh, no, no. Well, why waste our time?" Well, a male in that situation, again, stereotypically, but a male would say, if I can hit 80% of these, I'm going for it. I can make it up. I can learn, or I can, as I explained to the ladies, look, go in there and explain. If they ask the question about your PR background, tell them who you hired as partners in PR. Tell them you don't do PR directly as part of your services, but that you bring in people to do that on a contract basis, and that the client won't care. And so that's that confidence level, particularly going into new areas, that I find one of the biggest differences that I focus on in my coaching.
So getting people to open up about themselves rather than be narrow focused.
Yes, yeah, and also that's my approach to coaching is to coach the whole person, not just the work person. So I talk to them about their personal lives. I talk about what motivates them, what excites them, what's been the happiest times in their life, where what's been the most biggest struggles they face, or the hardest decisions they've made. It's just conversational, and then we're often able to refer back to that. But another example. I was coaching a lady in Northern California, and she volunteered to head up the 20th high school reunion event for her high school. And that's a volunteer position. She had a little committee together, and I asked her after the event, how did it go? And she told me what a wonderful success it was and everything. And I asked her, I said, okay, here's what I'd like you to reflect upon. In your role as chairman of that committee, you had to use your influence skills, because you couldn't tell people what to do. I mean, you're all volunteers. You had people might say they're going to do something and they don't do it. You're going to be disappointed. I want you to reflect on how you handle that as a leader in a influential leadership position, and now how can you apply it in your workplace, not just with the people who report to you, but to your colleagues and peers. How can you use those influence skills that were successful on the high school reunion? How can you use that when you need to influence and talk with your colleagues and peers across your organization? And boy, again, the light bulb went all open for her, on for her, because she went, geez, I never thought about that. I just thought about, I got that. I looked at that as a task. And I said, no, you were a leader. Yes, it was a task, but how did you accomplish that task through your leadership skills?
Let me ask you, would you like to use my screen share to display something?
Well, I hadn't pulled anything up, but while you ask the next question, I'll get the cover of the book for you if you'd like.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, okay. You better as well use this
So I'll
facility here.
multitask here, which is what I recommend people don't do, but I'll multitask just a little bit so you can ask the
Yeah,
next question while I'm looking this up.
yeah. My skill set in doing that is nil. But I tried it the other day on a live program, and I said, "Ugh, this is stress." So I really appreciate you sharing the on your your thinking all about leadership and power. Power relationships is what we're talking about here. Now, does it work the same when you're dealing with remote people or hybrid people or on-site people?
It does. You have to obviously there are some differences. I mean, it's hard to pick up the body language. There's the book cover of Human Leadership, and one of the awards it picked up. Yeah, yeah, it's better to do it like we're doing it on a video call, because you can see the body language of the person. You can see if they're listening to you or not, if they're nodding off or distracted by something else, rather than doing it on the phone. It's obviously best to do things in person, but in today's world, I think people become used to remote leadership, and but the other thing is, it's the cultural thing that takes place on remote. And I'm talking about when you're dealing with people across countries, across borders. A lot of the people I work with have backroom operations in India or the Philippines, and they're Americans who may never travel that part of the world. They don't understand some of the nuances of communicating with people from India or Thailand or Malaysia um, or even Brazil or Romania, for instance, where they also have backroom operations. So it's a communication aspect, the cross-cultural communication aspect comes to the fore a lot more when we're talking about dealing with remote workers in other parts of the world.
So that's really interesting. I'm sure you've experienced this on LinkedIn. I've been getting requests from out of the blue uh, from people who do back office, remote assistance, and at a phenomenally low rate, relatively speaking. So it's enticing. But that is the same exact thing then. Uh, I I'm a busy guy. I'm like a one man band here doing a lot of things. And for me to think about how am I going to communicate with this person, I'm going to make an assignment and then, you know, it, to what extent it's like, I mean, I stumble just thinking about it because there's no relationship there at all. And yet it's a task.
The task, and if you approach it as a task, let's just pick India, for instance, depending on the individual, of course, because we're all different. But if you approach it as the task, the people growing up in India focus on the relationship first and then the business relationship. They if you on a phone call with them, they'll want to talk 10 minutes or so, get to know you a little bit. I was on a call with India this morning, which is probably why it's on my mind. And the fact that I mentioned that I used to watch cricket when I lived in Australia, boy, we spent 7 or 8 minutes talking about cricket this morning, but that built the relationship. I mean, but as a typical American, if I hadn't lived overseas, my attitude would have been, I don't want to waste 7 minutes talking about cricket. I want to get to the task. And that's why, as you know, Ali Shami and I wrote that book, Partnering Successfully with American Firms, just for that reason, so that people outside the United States can understand that, when Americans want to get to the point, money is time is money, and let's not waste time getting to know each other. Let's go do business. Sometimes people overseas need to adapt to the American way of doing business, and sometimes we in America need to adapt to the way business is done in other parts of the world. And that was the gist of that book.
So as we come to a close in the next few minutes here, um, you wrote a sequel to Humany, about how to think about it or practical applications or something like that.
Yeah, the sequel is a non-business book. Um, so it's called Humany Mindset, Change Your Mindset, Change the World. And in it, I'm not talking about, solving the Middle East peace crisis or um, uh, world hunger or anything like that. It's I'm hesitating here because again, I'm going to try and pull up the cover for you. Um, but the concept here is, what can we all do in our individual lives to make the world better, a better place, as I say, for our children and our grandchildren to inherit. And so just things like how we interact with individuals. What is our mindset about people? We've lost so much of the courtesies of the world. Everyone's in a hurry, everyone's in a rush. People are walking, people don't make eye contact when you're walking around a shopping center or a supermarket. I mean, people, looking down at their phone all the time. And we've lost that interconnection. But the fact is that we all are human beings, and we focus too much on what divides us instead of our commonalities. And we have much more in common than we do differences. But again, the world we live in, the politics that we have for the last, I don't know, 8 or 12 or whatever number of years, the media, um, is all divisive and it's all negative. Even things even in the sports world. It's like I was reading the other day. Not that I follow golf, but I was reading something about the Master Tournament, and the article was more about the negative reaction to this golfer's wife and the outfit that she wore at the Masters. It's like, this is not a sports story, but it was in the sports section. And so, we find something to find fault with everybody. And so the humane mindset is that change our mindsets. Let's treat each other with respect, with some compassion, with some kindness, and let people be authentic who they are. Let's not try to mold people. So that's what this book's about.
Thank you for that. So, just as an aside, if I can comment on that example you just talked about somebody's wife's dress or something in a golf tournament, why would the newspaper editor or the TV editor even print that or talk about it?
It's clickbait, Ed. I mean, and I didn't actually see a physical newspaper. I saw it online, and if people click the story, then there's ads next to it, and so then they can it's kind of like getting people to that, whether people notice the ad or not, they get paid. Get the more viewership of that page, the more they can charge for that ad placement. So it's clickbait. It's just trying to get people eyeballs basically onto a web page.
Clickbait. That is cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
audience, as you could tell, the show is not rehearsed. So, but we do have some rules. And so, Stephen Howard, thank you very much for doing this, and I look forward to the next edition of New Leadership.
Thank you, Ed. It's been a great conversation. I enjoyed talking with you. So I hope your viewers enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Take care.
My pleasure.
Bye
Bye.
bye, and have fun coming up.